Hello everyone. Of course you've all heard about three big religions called Judaism, Christianity and Islam. But did you know all three of them are actually part of one and the same religion and believe in the same God? What is the link between these three big faiths, and why is Israel a holy land for all three of them? Billions of people on earth follow the teachings of one of these three belief systems, and for thousands of years they have influenced our civilization, our moral standards, our way of thinking, and our way of acting. We will look into the lives of the most important figures, the messengers who were later to be considered the founders of these three religions, often called prophets, in a prophetic era. We will start this video with Judaism. The second video will be about Christianity, and the third will be about Islam. Please feel free to leave a comment below. Where do we start? With Moses, the one who led the Jews out of slavery from Egypt to the Promised Land? With the three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac and Jacob? With Noah, the one who built a boat to survive the biggest flood the world had ever seen? Maybe we should start with Adam, the first human God breathed life into at the end of the creation of the world, according to the book called Genesis. Adam and his wife Eve, who ate the forbidden fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Long after Adam and Eve had been banished from paradise, and long after Noah had survived the great flood in his ark filled with animals, God had told a man called Abram to leave his country and kindred and go together with his wife Sarai to a land that he would show him, a promised land. God made a covenant with Abram, a pact. He promised to make of him the father of a big offspring and the patriarch of many peoples. From this moment on, he would be known as Abraham, and his wife would be named Sarah, and God would make her fertile. Abraham traveled through the Middle East. He visited Egypt and ended up in the Promised Land, Canaan, where he settled down and finally got children. As you can see in this family tree, Abraham had a son called Ismail, with his wife's handmaiden called Hagar or Hajar, when he was 86 years of age. As a test of his loyalty, he had to sacrifice his son. According to Islam, this was his firstborn son Ismail. But just before he killed him, an angel came and stopped him, showing to him a sheep he could sacrifice instead of his son. According to the Jewish tradition, this was his second son called Isaac, born from his wife Sarah when Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah 90 years. According to Muslim tradition, together with his son Ismail, Abraham rebuilt the Kaaba, a temple for God built by the prophet Adam that had been in ruins for centuries. According to Islamic tradition, Ismail became the ancestor of the Arabs and the great-great-grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad. According to the Torah, Isaac inherited everything of his father, including the promised land Canaan. Isaac got twin sons, Esau and Jacob, the former selling his birthright to the latter. After a night fighting with a mysterious man, Jacob got a new name, Israel. Henceforth, his descendants would be known by the name Israelites. Jacob became father of 12 sons, each of them the founder of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. According to this story, all the ethnic Jews are the descendants of Jacob, including Jesus Christ. One of the most famous of Jacob's sons was, of course, Joseph, the second last of the 12, and his father's favorite. He received more love and nice gifts from his father than his other brothers, like beautiful clothing. His brothers became jealous and sold him into slavery to Egyptian merchants. However, his destiny was greater than anyone would expect, and he became viceroy of the Pharaoh. Because of Joseph, the descendants of Jacob, called Israelites or Hebrews, because they spoke the Hebrew language, which is now again the official language of the modern-day state Israel, moved with their families from Canaan to Egypt. Over the centuries they multiplied and became Egyptian slaves. That's where Moses comes in. A Hebrew and descendant of Isaac, raised as a prince at the Egyptian court by the Pharaoh's daughter, destined to become the one to lead the Hebrews out of slavery, back to the Promised Land, back to Canaan. After 10 plagues had convinced the Pharaoh to release Moses and his kin. A journey that took 40 years, during which the Hebrews experienced a lot of hardships like lack of water, heat, hunger, wars, disease, etc. But always guided and supported by God, as God had promised in his covenant. The covenant was renewed with Moses. God would help his people as long as they obeyed his rules. It was the same journey during which Moses received from God the 10 Commandments on 2 stone tablets and many other laws and rules for the Hebrews to live by. This, one could say, is the beginning of Judaism, a story that started with the creation of Adam, the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, and completed by Moses, who brought the basic laws and commandments of God. The prophets after Moses didn't change much to these laws. They affirmed them, and they had prophecies about the future. An important element in Judaism is the eternal covenant. This is an agreement between God and the Jewish people. God will provide protection and a homeland, the Promised Land, and the Jews on their part need to obey the rules, commandments and laws. This is symbolized by the so-called Ark of the Covenant, a golden box with 2 angels and 2 carrying rods. God asked Moses to build this ark and to put the 2 stone tablets in it, carrying the 10 Commandments. This ark was placed in a holy tent called the Tabernacle, while the Jews were traveling the desert for 40 years, until they reached the Promised Land, Canaan. For the next centuries, the Jews lived in Canaan and called it the Kingdom of Israel, since approximately the year 1000 BC, ruled by famous kings like Solomon the Wise, King Saul, and David the Brave, the one who slew the giant Goliath. Later in time, the kingdom split into the Kingdom of Israel and the Kingdom of Judah, with Jerusalem as capital. In Jerusalem, a temple was built during the reign of King Solomon. This became the most holy place for the Jews, where the high priest sacrificed animals and performed rituals for God. The Ark of the Covenant was now placed inside this temple, a bit more sturdy than a tent. This temple was destroyed in 586 BC by the Babylonians, then rebuilt when the Persians defeated the Babylonians in 538 BC, and King Cyrus the Great proclaimed religious freedom. Later, the Greeks and Macedonians conquered the area under Alexander the Great. And later the Romans, who destroyed the temple again in 70 AD, when the Jews rebelled against the Romans who occupied their land and suppressed their religion. More than 1 million people were killed or died of hunger during the siege. Results of this event was a shift in focus on the Holy Temple in Jerusalem to the synagogues, places for Jews to come together to study the holy writings and to worship God. Here are some examples of modern-day ones. In spite of all the hardships the Jews suffered, the books of the Jewish faith, called the Tanakh, promised a better future, predicted by prophets like Isaiah, Zechariah, and Ezekiel. They predicted a Messiah would come, an anointed king, someone who would free the people from all earthly misery, and usher in an era of peace and justice for everyone. They prophesied that when the Messiah becomes king, leaders of the world will look to him for guidance. Knowledge of God will fill the world. All Israelites will return to their homeland. Israel and Judah shall be made into one nation again. And illness, hunger, and death will cease, and barren lands will be made fruitful. The old world will come to an end, and God will establish a new heaven and a new earth. God will raise all people from the dead to live in this new world. Until today, Jews still await the arrival of this Messiah. However, other people believe this Messiah has already come. This will be continued in the next video.